Hey there and welcome back to Rimworld. My name is Pete and today we complete another episode of our Rimworld series in the Cold Bog with the Cult of Jingz. Last time we left off after recruiting both Reddini and Took to our colony, and so Livienna is once again back up to 6 colonists. However, 3 of them are currently not home, as Maniac and our 2 newcomers have just landed near an ancient complex, a complex that promises some info about the mysterious Horn of Edmo. And so, today we start things off as the 3 of them make their way closer to the structure. There are no doors on this side, but we can simply demolish a wall to get in, and then take a closer look at what's behind. Thankfully, we don't see any enemies, but with the ancient enemy terminal here, we could likely summon a few. We also have a comms console linked to a supply satellite, and finally a hermetic crate with unknown contents. We also have an unstable fuel node a bit further into the room, so let's be careful as we slowly enter. And yes, just as I had expected, the node is about to explode pretty much immediately, and this will make our exploration a little bit more difficult. Alright, so half of the room is on fire, but because we removed that wall section, it will not actually heat up above the outside temperatures, so at least there's that. By marking the entire area as our home zone, we can now have our 3 adventurers take care of the issue, and as you can see, this will take a while. So let's check back in at home for a moment, where Reddini is finally getting her own bedroom, including a comfortable armchair and a tailoring bench, at least as soon as we have enough wood. Our firefighters, meanwhile, are making good progress and have managed to save everything of value inside the room. Now it's only a matter of beating out the last few flames. And while they take care of that, we can send Specs over to that small 2-person caravan that arrived near the end of the last episode and do some trading. Unfortunately though, there isn't anything here that we really need, and we also can't sell much, so the interaction is quickly completed. Inside of the ancient complex, meanwhile, the fire has been beaten into submission and we can continue exploring. In the next room here, we then find the first terminal that we are looking for. Hacking this one will give us some clues about the Horn of Edmo. In the room next door then, we find the second terminal, and according to the quest description, these are the only ones present on the map. We also have another crate here, as well as one more room that we haven't looked into yet, so let's see what Took can find. And that's nothing too crazy, just a bit of rubble, so I would say it's time to start hacking. Took is not capable of doing so, which means that Maniac and Reddini will have to crack the terminals, while Took can take a nap and wait until they're done. Back in Livienna, meanwhile, I quickly want to touch on the subject of attacking neutral visitors like these, as most of you were in favor of a more aggressive approach here. However, a vast majority of comments also mentioned that you would like to see us only attack those factions with ideologies that don't match ours, and these guys are simple individualists, meaning they respect everyone's right to their own ideas and decisions. That doesn't necessarily strike me as an obvious conflict with the Cult of Jingz, so I think we'll remain on their good, or at least neutral side for now, not to mention that an attack might not be a smart move at this point anyway, considering that we only have 3 colonists to work with, and that Thoraya is still recovering from last episode's fight. Speaking of Thoraya, despite her injuries, she has now begun the construction of Reddini's new armchair, while Reddini herself is still busy hacking. Maniac is already done with his task though, and so as a rainy thunderstorm rumbles in the background, we can do a bit more exploring with him, although I don't think we're going to find anything more here. A neat little hidden cave might be nice to look at, but doesn't actually hold anything of interest, and so we can already position Maniac and Took next to that hermetic crate while we wait for Reddini to finish. And there we are. Technically, we have now done all that we came here to do, but it wouldn't be a proper adventure if we left now. So instead, let's open up that crate and see what's inside. I believe it's actually impossible for enemies to be in these crates, but I currently don't have that much experience with these relic quests, so I think it's best to be careful for now. In any case, we obtain a joy wire, quite fitting I'd say, because as you might recall, we did install one in the last series as well, on none other than Edmo himself. Okay, 7 doses of luciferium, very interesting and at the very least a valuable trade good. Speaking of which, we also still have that satellite console over here, so let's hack that next and see if the supply drop perhaps also holds something good in store for us. And not only are the cargo pods dropping right next to our shuttle, they also contain about 200 units of pemmican, and despite last episode's cooking marathon, we are not going to say no to that. Now, one last thing, we still have this ancient enemy terminal over here, and the game says it already, if we hack this we will alert some enemies. However, we have some skilled fighters in our ranks, and the quest isn't supposed to be overly difficult, so I would say we'll take our chances. After all, our 3 adventurers want to be able to tell a good story when they get home. Sadly though, I'm not exactly sure how good of a story this is going to be, as the enemy is only a single woman with a revolver. And so, as we briefly jump back to Dryad, who is still improving her increasingly formidable construction skill, I don't think we need to make this any longer than it needs to be. With everyone setting up an ambush outside, our lone attacker is certainly at a disadvantage, and as she rushes straight for our archers, we can send in Reddini and her Horn, while Maniac and Took relocate. All in all though, this is only a matter of time. And there we are, Maniac lands the killing blow and we survive the encounter unharmed. Time to get back to the shuttle. Conveniently enough, we don't even need to manually load any items or colonists, so we can simply select all 3 as well as the pemmican and the silver from the fallen attacker, and once we confirm that selection, everything is instantly loaded into the shuttle and our 3 adventurers are on their way back home. A few moments later, the crew arrives back in Livienna, and for now I think everyone has earned themselves a few hours of rest. On the following morning, our first medicine maker Dryad hatches, and that means we can give out another name from the list of patrons in the naming rights tier and above. This time we are going with Solar Bear, so congratulations and welcome to the colony. I hope you make a lot of medicine for us. And we might need that first batch soon, as Livienna is once again under attack. And this time we are looking at something a bit more concerning, as 9 hostile tribespeople close in from the east and a further 4 are coming in from the west. Now, despite the dire outlook here, I think we are moderately well equipped to take these enemies on head first, perhaps also because we haven't really built any traps at the moment. Still, we have trees, and for the Cult of Jingz, that is all that counts, so let's send our archers into cover behind some trunks and open fire. As always, our Woodmaker Dryads seem to be the attacker's primary target for now, but in some ways that actually works in our favor, as it keeps them in place and allows us some easy shots. Dryad and Reddini meanwhile engage the archers in melee combat, and yes, we should probably also acquire a few more suits of armor for everyone involved here, so once we have that tailoring bench up and running again, we will get on that. For the time being, though, it looks like we are able to handle ourselves, and so we can in fact drive this group of enemies off and leave just a handful of survivors. The other, much smaller group has already made it across the river though, so the fight isn't over yet, and both Reddini and Dryad have already suffered a good number of injuries. Nothing life-threatening so far, but we should probably make sure it stays that way. A little bit more critical is the situation for our Woodmaker Dryad Mixie, but more on that in just a second. For now, we can once again hide our archers behind some trees and open fire, and this time we should definitely have the upper hand. And indeed, there we go, that's another raid taken care of. Looks like the Cult of Jingz is in fact capable of dealing with these types of attacks on a regular basis now. Still, I don't want to jinx anything, so we shouldn't be too confident just yet, especially since we did almost lose our Woodmaker Dryad Mixie here, who is currently being saved by Reddini. One of the fleeing attackers, meanwhile, is shot down near our southern gate, and with that, the map should be clear of enemies, at least those who are still alive. Thanks to Reddini's first aid, Dryad Mixie is quickly back up on its feet and will now enter a healing pod. Unfortunately, another front paw was lost in the attack, so we are giving Mixie a few days here to grow it back. Specs and Maniac, meanwhile, continue the violence for a bit longer, as they can hunt down a muffalo, the last remaining one on the map for now and a good source of meat, which we are going to need now that we need to make kibble for 2 animals. And yes, I do realize that we are once again back to our old ways of feeding muffalos with muffalos, but honestly, this wouldn't be Rimworld without at least a little bit of cannibalism. Back in the base meanwhile, Dryad receives some first aid from Reddini, who shortly after receives some first aid of her own from Specs, who is definitely not a skilled doctor, but for now it will have to do. I think it's still better than having a half-blind woman tend to herself. The rest of the evening meanwhile remains uneventful until we receive another quest in the night. This is in fact already the next part of the hunt for the Horn of Edmo, as we have discovered another ancient complex nearby. This time, however, there won't be a shuttle to take us there, so we need to make the journey on foot. As you can see, it is not terribly far, but the terrain is a little mountainous, so this will probably be a trip that lasts for several days. In the morning then, a shaman merchant passes by, and of course we are immediately checking if we can perhaps attack these guys. Apart from the fact that 1/3 of our colony is not really in a fighting state, however, we also actually have a bit of a history with the way of spiritism, as Coko is a former member. That does not necessarily mean that they get a pass though, but again, we are just coming off a sizable raid, and even if we wanted to attack, I don't think that's the smart move at this point. So instead, we can watch as medicine maker Dryad Solar Bear produces our first batch of herbal medicine, and with 4 of these coming every day from here on out, and with a second medicine maker Dryad planned, I think our days of foraging for wild heal root are definitely behind us. As Specs then approaches the trade caravan, we are once again completing the transactions quickly. We are only selling our luciferium here and don't buy or sell anything else. We also received the good news that Muffalo Tina is pregnant, so it certainly didn't take long for her and Shadowmage to grow comfortable around each other. And so, with Muffalo babies on the way and Reddini making a full recovery from her injuries, we can now plant another Gauranlen Tree. We have 1 more seed on the map here, and with a plant skill of 11 and minor passion, Coko seems like a great candidate to bond with the tree. Planting Gauranlen Tree number 3 also earns us our next ideology development point, and with that we are now at 10 and can actually reform the Cult of Jingz for the first time. And this is where I would really like to involve you guys, as we have plenty of options to make changes here. We can add a meme, which we will definitely do, and we can also change precepts, roles, structures and much more. For now though, I would really like to know which meme you think we should add. I am not going to explain them all here, most of you probably already know what most of them do from your own or other people's playthroughs, but I feel like there are perhaps a few that might fit quite well. I am definitely open for some of the more impactful stuff, and my personal choice at this point would probably be Raider, but keep in mind that I also want to use this playthrough to show off as many of the new ideology features as possible, and some of them are only available to certain memes and precepts, so those are the ones that intrigue me most. What I don't want to do is add stuff that has very little impact or is basically just a free bonus. I am looking at you, collectivist. But again, I don't want to dive too deep into the details of every single meme here, so please let me know what you think we should do next, and if you already have ideas for the memes that should come after that, then feel free to leave those in the comments as well. For now though, it is time to connect Coko with her new Gauranlen Tree, and of course, as always, the entire colony will participate in this ritual. The tree is placed right next to Dryad, so the 2 of them might be able to chat while pruning. At the very least, it will hopefully ensure that we don't get our dryads killed by placing trees all over the place. With the ritual completed, we can now select which dryads we want to have here, and for this tree we'll go with the barkskin. This is supposed to be a bit of a melee tank dryad. I have heard mixed things about it to be honest, but I would like to test it out myself. A dryad that can soak up some damage could definitely be useful to draw our enemy's attention while our archers remain at a safe distance, but if it turns out that the barkskin just gets killed all the time, we will of course change to something else. Following that, we will now also start researching smithing, because as I said, armor is becoming increasingly important, and smithing itself already unlocks a few useful items, not to mention that it will also allow us to research plate armor once the project is completed. And while we're talking about barkskin dryads and armors, I would also be very interested to hear your ideas on colony defenses. I think I have mentioned this already, I don't really think I want to build a big kill box this time. but there are perhaps a few creative defensive solutions that I am overlooking, so if you have any ideas on how to better protect Livienna, then feel free to leave them down below in the comments. For now, another day is slowly winding down with another meditation session, and we are actually once again at the point where we have grown enough anima grass to give someone a new psychic rank. And this time I think we are going with Maniac, who as our combat specialist could definitely benefit from having psychic powers, and so, since him and Specs are the only two people in our colony with the nature type meditation focus, they can now have themselves another ritual while the rest of the colony heads off to bed. In the early morning hours then, the ritual is complete and Maniac learns Stun. In my opinion, a pretty useful power that renders a target completely immobile, albeit only for 3 seconds. A little later then, Dryad makes a full recovery, and we're also sending Maniac out into the swamp to do some mining. We want to build ourselves a wood-fueled stove, and for that we need some steel, so this is what Maniac will do for the next few hours. Back in the base meanwhile, we are scavenging our old buildings for some more resources, because the wood-fueled stove is not the only thing we want to build. Dryad also receives a creativity inspiration, and considering that she is a constructor and not so much a crafter, I think we will probably use this on some type of furniture. My first instinct would be to build something nice out of jade, for example. We have a bit of that lying around, but again, let me know what you think we should use this on. With Maniac's mining session completed for now, he can then also do some hunting, and we can even try out his new stun power here, which as you can see gives him a bit of extra time to line up that second shot. However, the time window is admittedly rather small. Back in the base, we are now using all of those materials to construct ourselves a stonecutter's table. I think it is time that we incorporate at least some stone into our village, mainly to cut down on our wood consumption, but of course also to at least somewhat fireproof the place. For now, Reddini will start by cutting granite blocks, which does not actually increase her crafting skill. And yes, I know, being half blind will not exactly make this task go any faster. Still, as long as we're not constructing, she doesn't really have that much to do otherwise, so I'd rather have her do an inefficient task than no task at all. A psychic soothe then also benefits all males in the colony, so Maniac and Took will be a bit happier. And with the first stone blocks created, we can now start laying down some pathways. Not only will this look nice, it will also speed up our colonists' movement speed inside of Livienna, and it will act as a natural fire barrier between buildings as well. And yes, I know a one-tile path is not enough to prevent every fire from spreading, but it does make the base at least a little bit safer. Around midnight then, Took and Reddini get into it, and this could actually get interesting considering they are both competent melee fighters, so we are going to let this play out and see who comes out on top. Okay, looks like the fight ends in a more or less respectful draw. I think we will let these fights keep going in the future though. Of course, the first instinct is always to interrupt them, but I think for our colony a little bit of social fighting here and there fits quite well. Now, on the next morning it is finally time to construct that wood-fueled stove, and for that we are moving our butcher table out into the open for now. Yes, this will cause a bit of a work speed penalty, but butchering is one of the faster tasks in the game, so as long as we're not mass-producing hundreds of units of kibble, I don't think this is going to be too noticeable. The old butchering room will therefore now become our new kitchen. Specs can also make sure that we have some light inside, and with that we actually no longer need any campfires at all. Shortly after that, woodmaker Dryad Mixie then also leaves its healing cocoon again, and that means our wood production will soon be back at its usual levels. Unfortunately then, a blight strikes one of our rice fields in the afternoon, but Specs and Coko are quick on the scene to harvest what they can, with little results though, as the plants here are not yet mature enough to yield anything. In the late afternoon then, Maniac can hunt another turkey and improve his shooting skill, which as you can see is progressing nicely and currently sits at a respectable level 13. In the evening then, Took can also embrace his role as cook and try out our new wood-fueled stove. With a cooking skill of 8, he will now take over this task for good. And so, as another night slowly sets across the swamp, I think we have reached a good point to make the cut. In the next episode, I think we'll focus a bit more on defenses, and of course we will also develop our ideology. And again, let me know which direction you would like to see us take in the comments down below. Of course, we also have some fan art today, once again submitted by Blasphemy. This artwork showing that scene from the last episode in which we guided those Thrumbos towards the trade caravans. And honestly, week in and week out, I'm just absolutely stunned by what you guys can come up with, usually often over the course of just a few days between episodes. So let me just say that I very much respect that amount of creativity and talent. Speaking of which, I didn't really mention it over the last few episodes, but Daniel Farkas over on his blog is still keeping up with the series, so if you want to read some short stories about the Cult of Jingz, then head on over there. So far he has written short chapters all the way up to episode 9, I believe, and in my opinion they are definitely worth a read. So again, thank you all for your weekly contributions, and of course, as always, to those of you watching, I hope you enjoyed today's episode, and if you did, then I would be very happy if you could leave a thumbs up. If you like what I'm doing and want to support me and my channel further, then you can of course do so, for example by subscribing to stay up to date, by grabbing some merch over on shop.petecomplete.com, or by checking out and maybe even pledging to the Pete Complete Patreon. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.